Hello, Dr. Bashford again. And so we're going to continue our discussion of the skin. And so we want to talk about how the skin repair itself. We want to talk about what a burn is and how we would classify burns and how we could tell if someone was critical if they were burned. So the first thing I want to do is talk about how does our skin repair itself. And as I'm going through this, I want you to also think about what we learned earlier about protein synthesis and cell division, because you need to have an understanding of protein synthesis and cell division to understand how things repair. So as I'm going through this, think back, okay, what would be happening? How would these cells be replicating their DNA? How would transcription and translation be going on? We want to make sure we understand that that's what's going on when we talk about tissue repair. The skin is cells are dividing, they're making more proteins, and that's how they're repairing themselves. So when we talk about tissue repair, there's two main ways that tissues repair themselves: regeneration and fibrosis. So regeneration, basically making more cells, and then fibrosis will go in and kind of strengthen the area that had been damaged. And depends on how severely a tissue has been damaged, how much regeneration and fibrosis is going to occur. So let's just imagine that our injury is a nail that has punctured into our skin. And what's going to happen? How are we going to, number one, we have to take the nail out. But what's going to happen? How are we going to fill this hole that's been made by the nail? How are we going to repair that and make it whole again? So the first step, once you've removed the nail, is you're going to have inflammation. So when those bacteria, everything's covered in bacteria. As bacteria are released into your skin or into your tissues, inflammatory chemicals are released. And so these bacteria that act as a signal, there's some cells in your skin that recognize those bacteria as foreign, and they cause this cascade of events which causes inflammation to occur. And inflammation is that redness that you see, that swelling, sometimes heat, sometimes pain. So when you see these things, redness, swelling, heat, and pain, you know you have some kind of inflammation. So you've got to have the first steps of healing to go on. So what you want to do is you want to clot that blood, and you also want to come in and get rid of anything that's foreign, like the bacteria or pieces of wood or nail parts that have pierced your skin. So these inflammatory chemicals are released by those cells that recognize that your tissue has been damaged, okay? And so you get these inflammatory chemicals released, and they cause your blood vessels to become leaky. And so that allows fluid to leak out into the area. That's where you get the swelling, and also for white blood cells to actually exit the blood vessels and go out into the area. And so these white blood cells are part of your immune system, and they can go in and clean up bacteria that have entered into an open wound. So you want to clot the blood, you want to form a scab, and then you want to go in and send cells in to clean up the area. That's basically what inflammation is doing. It's stopping the blood, it's forming the scab, and it's cleaning up any debris or foreign invaders or bacteria that need to be taken care of. You'll learn more about this as we go into immunology in your second anatomy. All right, so now we've gotten the area cleaned up. We've stopped the blood flow. We've gotten the area cleaned up, but we have a hole. There's a space there. And so we need to do something to fill that space. So the first or the next thing we do is organize, so organization. So we want to replace that blood clot with granulation tissue. Okay, so cells come in and they start putting down tissue. It's almost like they're knitting back that hole. So they're putting in granulation tissue to knit back that space and start to hold it together. All right, and as you're doing this, your epithelial layer is going to start to regenerate. So this is down in your dermis. You're starting to put fibers together like a stitch to hold that tissue in place. Your epithelium regenerates and starts to rebuild that epithelial layer. And so remember, this is the mitotic layer, that stratum basale, and so it's going to start dividing, and that way these cells can start to migrate up. If you've ever noticed, if you've ever picked off a scab, you notice it's healed kind of down. If you peel the scab and look under, you can see the healing has begun. So it has to heal from deep to superficial. You got to build those new cells, and they'll migrate up to the top as they mature and die off and they start to stack up. All right, so here we have our regenerated epithelium. So this is now completely regenerated, and we have our fibrosed area. And so as this area that's got all these fibers, they kind of start to contract and pull this tissue together. So it matures and pulls and contracts and pulls that tissue together and seals the hole, okay? And your epithelium is going to kind of thicken. This is one of the reasons you'll see kind of a scar type of an area over a former cut or tear. It's the way the epithelial tissue will thicken over that wound. When you fully regenerate the epithelium, you'll also, you may feel, if you've ever had a scar, it feels kind of hard under there. That's that fibrosed area. So you've got some tissue that's a little bit different than it was before. It's a little bit stronger, and so that's why the scarring looks a little different. The epithelium is a little thicker, and then you can feel that fibrosed area underneath as the scar. All right, so now you've got your healing. The blood vessels are back intact. All your bacteria are gone. Your skin is pulled back together, and you've replaced your epithelial layer. Okay? So, again, real basic. We'll do some more detail about that later on, but, again, just a basic understanding of what's going on. Okay, so I want to talk about burns next. And so burns occur when you have tissue damage, and a burn, think about putting a steak on something hot. So raw meat on a hot stove or a hot grill, that heat denatures the proteins, and if the cells were alive, it would kill the cells. So burns is basically tissue damage due to denaturing the proteins and cell death. Usually heat, that's when we think about a burn, we're thinking about heat. But also electrical burns, okay? Radiation burns, think about the sunburn, or a chemical burn. If you ever poured, accidentally, had an acid burn, a chemical on your skin can burn it. Now, burns are dangerous because the threat is that you can actually have fluid and electrolyte problems. Remember that epidermal layer is your waxy layer that helps hold the moisture in, and so if you have damage to your skin, then you can ooze out a lot of fluid, and you can get in trouble with your dehydration and electrolyte balance. If you're not able to balance your water and your electrolytes, that can lead to renal or kidney problems. Renal means kidney. Or circulatory shock, okay? So severe burns can lead to death, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So when we talk about burns, we classify them three ways, and we use the words first degree, second degree, and third degree. And really all that means is what layer has been damaged. So if it's a first degree burn, only the epidermis is damaged. If it's a second degree burn, you have the epidermis and the dermis are damaged. And a third degree burn is all three layers have been damaged. So with a first degree burn, we call that a superficial burn. A lot of times it's going to be red. It may be a little, you may have some swelling, not blistering, but maybe some swelling, and it's going to be painful. This is just your good old sunburn, okay? And you really don't expect any scarring. They may get tanning. Your melanocytes may kick in, and you get tanning, but you shouldn't see scarring. With a second degree burn, you're going to have damage of the first and second layers. Epidermis and dermis are going to have damage. You're going to see, this is going to be called a partial thickness burn. Many times you're going to see blistering. So if you see blistering, you have a second degree burn. And this is really painful because the nerve endings in your dermis, they're going to be affected. So you're getting down to the nerve ending and you're causing a lot of pain. If you get a blister formed, okay, and so that blister's there to protect the underlying area, try not to pop that blister. If you can keep the blister intact, then you can decrease the chance of infection. Okay, so if the blisters can stay intact and you don't get infection, then you shouldn't get scarring. But if the blisters pop and then bacteria and things can get into the area, that increases your risks for infection and also scarring. Okay, but again, second-degree burns can be very painful. So sunburns can become second-degree burns, or touching something hot can be a second-degree burn. Third degree, all three layers, dermis, epidermis, hypodermis, everything's damaged. We call this a full thickness burn. And you look at this, it could be many colors. It can be kind of a gray color, or really cherry red, or black, almost like charcoal. I've got a picture I'll show you. Many times there won't be any swelling or pain because there's nothing there to even cause anything. There's no nerve endings there. They've been damaged. The vessels that were there are not there to ooze anything, so you a lot of times will just see exposed, maybe muscle or even bone, depending how deep the burn is. And this usually won't heal. You have to have a skin graft. With the first degree burn, you still got your epidermis there. That stratum basalis there, and the little cells migrate, and it repairs itself. Same thing with the second degree burn. The epidermis will kind of spread back over, and your dermis is there, and it repairs itself. You get mitosis and cell division going on. But with the third degree burn, it's really hard for the skin to do its own repair work. You've got to help it out by doing a skin graft. So this is a picture of what this would look like. Again, the first degree burn would just be red, so think of a sunburn. Second degree burn, you would see blistering. And in a third degree burn, you would see, severe tissue damage all the way down to the fat layer. So this is a picture of a third degree burn here. It looks kind of bad. You can see it looks like charcoal, like someone's had like a log in a fire. You can actually see the ashy look of the skin. Now remember, when someone has a burn, they don't just, especially a third degree burn, they don't just have third degree. So the area that had the longest exposure to the heat will be the third degree burn, and then out from there you'll have a second degree burn, and then further out a first degree burn. Again, with the second degree burn the same way. The area that was associated or close to the heat the longest will be second degree, and then spread out from there will be first degree. So although this part is not painful, someone that was a third degree burn may have a lot of pain because they also have second and first degree burns around the third degree burn area. So don't think that a third degree, if someone that's got third degree burns, they're in no pain. They probably are because they also have some second and first degree burning around that area. Okay, so when we talk about burns, there's something called the rule of nines. And the rule of nines tells you what percent of your body is burned, okay? So you can say someone has 25% of their body has first degree burns, or 10% of their body has third degree burns. And it's just a really quick way to, when you come into the ER for the staff to look at the body quickly and assess, give a numerical value to what percent of the body is burned. And this is important because when you know how much of their body surface is burned, it gives you an idea of the potential problem you may have with fluid and electrolytes. It tells you how much fluid you may need to give them IV. If 15% of someone's body has this burn, then you know they're going to require IV fluids, and you can use this as a calculation to figure that out. Now, we're not going to do that quite yet. You'll do that as you get into nursing school if that's your plan. But I do want you to be able to calculate percent of the body surface area that's burned, because you'll hear this on the news. They'll say, "Oh, so and so was in a house fire and they were burned over 45% of their body." Well, how did they come up with that number? Did someone take a tape measure and measure it all out and say, "Okay, that looks about like this"? No, there's a standard. And so the standard is, if you look at the head, so let's just start at the head and neck. The front of the face and the front of the neck, that equals 4.5%. The back of the head is 4.5%. So the whole head is 9%. If you look at the upper limbs, the arms, the anterior part of the arm is 4.5%. The posterior is 4.5%. So a whole arm is 9%. So two arms together would be 18. Okay. If you look at the trunk, the front of the trunk is 18%. The back of the trunk is 18%. Add those together, it's 36%. These are all in multiples of 9. The perineum area, this is going to be 1%. The front of the leg is 9. The back of the leg is 9. So each leg is 18. Both legs is 36. And then that adds up to 100%. Okay. So when you look at someone's arm, you'd say, okay, front and back, so it's 4.5, 4.5, that's 9, and you start adding up your nines. And so you can quickly do a little multiplication and figure out how much of the body is burned. Now, you cannot have a calculator on your test. You guys should be able to do your nines. If you can't, I have a little trick for you. So if you've never learned this, to figure out what 9 times whatever is, you can simply use your fingers, okay? So let me show you. 9 times 1, there's 9 left, right? 9 times 2, there's 1 and 8, 18. 9 times 3, 27. 9 times 4, 36. 9 times 5, 45. See how that works? 9 times 6, 54. Okay? So if you don't need a calculator, just use your fingers and you can figure it out if you can't do your nuns. Okay, so let's do a little test. So if on the test I said, okay, the area burned is going to be the posterior of the head, the entire trunk, and the right arm. So you go posterior of the head. That's 4.5%. Okay, the entire trunk. Remember, you have 18 on the front, 18 on the back. 36. The right arm, 4.5 on the front, 4.5 on the back. 9. Add those together, and it's 49.5. So you'll have to do something like that on your exam. You won't have a picture, so you just have to memorize the different areas and what their value is. So again, why do we care? Because we use this as an indication of if someone is in critical condition. I know you've heard that word. Someone goes to the hospital and they're in stable condition, or they're in critical condition. Well, you're in critical condition, which means you're probably going to need IV fluids and, risk of death. If 25% of your body or more has second-degree burns, we consider that critical. It only requires 10% of your body to have third-degree burns. Okay, so it doesn't take very much. Just 10% of your body with third-degree burns makes you critical. Because remember, you've destroyed all that tissue, and so you can start oozing lots of fluids. You don't have anything kind of holding your fluids in anymore. You're open to infection and bacteria, so it's very likely that you could go into electrolyte imbalance, you could go into shock, or you could go have an infection. So when I use the word shock, what does that mean? Circulatory shock. So think back. So this is my blood vessel, okay? And so if I've got tissue damage, and so my blood plasma starts to ooze out into my interstitial area, so my extracellular area, my tissue, okay? So as blood plasma starts to ooze out, because there's no epidermis here anymore, that fluid just keeps on going. Okay, it just oozes out. And you start to lose volume from inside your blood vessels. Okay, so if you don't have as much blood filling up your blood vessels, then your blood pressure falls, and that's called circulatory shock. So you're losing so much fluid, you can't replace it, your blood volume, you can't keep your blood vessels full, and so your blood pressure drops and you go into shock. Now, if your face or your hands or feet have third-degree burns, that's also critical. Think about your hands and feet. When we talk about skin, that's that thick skin. Okay, so there's a lot of loss of tissue when you have a burn on a thick skin. But also, we use our hands and feet. So you don't want someone to lose the ability to walk because they've been burned. So that's one reason the feet are so important. You want to try to heal that as quickly as possible so they don't lose their ability to walk. Same thing with the hands. We all use our hands. We need it to write and type and daily living and feed ourselves, so hands are critical. And, of course, the face, that should be obvious. What goes on here? You eat, you breathe. Okay, so if you can't eat and breathe, if you've got burns here and something's obstructing your airway, then you could lose your ability to eat and breathe, or vision. You can't see anymore. So we want to make sure we're dealing with those issues. So that would be critical if you have burning on your face. But remember, if a patient comes in with these third-degree burns, they probably have second and first-degree burns as well. All right, so how do we treat a burn victim? You've got a case study that you're going to do just to help you learn a little bit more about this. But one of the things with severe burns is to give them IVs. You've got to be replacing the fluids that they're oozing out. Okay, so IV fluids to help do fluid replacement. You've got to debride the burn tissue, and that just means kind of debriding is they kind of scrub it away. You got to get rid of that burn tissue because it's dead, and it can lead. It's a breeding ground for bacteria, so you got to get rid of it. And you got to use antibiotics to keep the person from getting an infection. And then you've got to graft the skin. And so if it's a severe third-degree burn, large area, they're going to do some kind of a skin graft. And you're welcome to Google. There's lots of different sites to show you how that works. But they literally take a piece of tissue from an area that's not burned on you, and they use this piece of equipment that kind of punches holes in it, perforates it so it can be stretched out. And then they take that stretched out skin and lay it over the area that needs to be healed, and then that tissue will regrow. So your skin will actually regrow. The most successful is if you use an autograft, which means you take it from yourself. So if you burn your arm, then they would take tissue from your thigh. There's also synthetic grafts. They've got some synthetic materials they can use. And sometimes those are temporary, sometimes not. Then you can have an allograft. These are not as successful. They may be rejected, and that should be, there should not be a U there. That can be rejected. So an allograft means from somebody else. So if you got burned and I gave you tissue, that's an allograft, just another person. An isograft is your identical twin. So that one, pretty good. You know, that's not a bad way to go. That has a good chance of working. Okay. A xenograft. All right. And again, I got a couple of spelling errors in there. I'll fix those on the upload version. I got to making this. Must be too late at night when I made this PowerPoint. A xenograft is from an animal. Okay, so it also may be rejected. So maybe pig skin or something like that. So those are the different types of grafts: autografts, allografts, isografts, and xenografts. So autografts are your most successful. And then last but not least, you've got to have therapy. And that's probably one of the more painful things. So as soon as they graft that skin, they've got to get you moving. You want to keep that skin pliable and flexible. You don't want it to form strictures. And so you may have seen someone that has a burn and their skin looks real tight. So if it tightens up and forms these strictures, they lose flexibility. So you want to make sure that if it's a chest burn, they're taking big breaths and keeping that chest real flexible so that they don't have any strictures that prevent them from breathing. You want to make sure they have good mobility in their hand so their hand doesn't make a claw and they can't use it anymore. So therapy is very important, but it can also be very, very painful to keep that skin stretched. So this is what you would do if you had a burn. All right, that's all I'm going to talk about today, and I will see you in another video. Thank you.